I want to just make a couple of general points, and John's already noted life is risky, and the probability of death for all of us is 1. It's the same for populations. The question then is not if people die, it's when they die and what they die of are what is associated with death. And I think we need to recognize that that's a pretty soft statistic. When they die is not, but the associated indices in terms of the death are very soft. In general, individuals and societies value lifespan. The central issue then becomes the relative role of the multiple factors that impact lifespan for individuals and populations. Those that have a negative impact, and I'm always pleased to see Arden Pope's presentation and his note where cigarette smoking fits into that. That gives a benchmark to somebody looking at that data, and especially to members of the public. But we also know others in terms of alcohol being poor. We know those that have positive impact, education, income. And then there's a host of factors that, quite frankly, I'll say most of the time they're in the noise level. And that's what we're talking about here. But we as a group tend to put a magnifying glass on and focus on this, not just air pollution. We're now talking about PM2.5, one constituent within it. And I think we do a disservice to society with that. And the problem we have is you know, we're talking in a discussion today that's the interface of science and public policy. That's a very uncomfortable piece of turf. Uncomfortable for scientists. They don't want to get too far over into the policy side. It's very uncomfortable for policymakers and politicians. But we need to recognize that's the turf we're talking about, and quite frankly, we need to have a more robust discussion there in terms of my view of emphasizing that science needs to inform these policy and political decisions, but at the end of the day, they are judgments that end up being made by policymakers and politicians. If they're going to make judgments for the public good, they need to see the total landscape, not just looking with the magnification lens on the issue. So I urge CARB to take a harder look at what it is we're talking about, examine all the studies in terms of what were the covariants that were examined, whether we want to call them confounders or other risk factors, whatever. What were the magnitude of those, both on the positive and the negative? I find it interesting when I see a data set analyzed and ozone is way up at the top, but in fact when I see the data set examined later, another pollutant is there. But most importantly, I think we have to start looking at these in a broader context. If politicians and policymakers are going to make decisions that are going to have positive impact on the public good, and I'll admit my views are somewhat emotional in shape, but quite frankly, today the most important thing that I see for people is having a job and income.